All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm your host, John Wachter. Let's get you informed. Today's a special day for me for the podcast because we have our first guest, a good friend of mine, a sports journalist, Jack Goodwillie. It's good to have you here, Jack.
It's good to be here. Good to finally get on the pod and talk some football because that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and it's good to have somebody else to talk to, so I'm not just talking to myself for 20 minutes. So that's definitely good. Today's show, we're going to talk about the head coaching carousel that's been going on, the new hires, and how we feel about them. I'm happy to have you on here for this one because I think that you know a bit more about the head coaching level of the NFL than what I do, and it'll definitely be interesting to get your opinion on some of these things as I go down them. I'm gonna start off at the top. My favorite head coaching hire here is Hugh Jackson to the Browns. I think this is the best hiring of the entire season, and I want to know if you agree with that.
I do agree, and I'll tell you why. Hugh Jackson, going into the whole coaching search thing, I looked at him as a top candidate. One, because of what he was able to do with the Oakland Raiders. What was that? 2011, maybe?
Yeah, I believe so.
It was short. He was like the last head coach before Al Davis's death, and he was, I think, unjustly fired from that job. But he went on to he caught on with the Bengals, and first as a running backs coach, and he got to work behind Jay Gruden and the rest of the staff there. And then when Gruden left for Washington, he took over at the offensive coordinator position. Now, what I like about Jackson is that he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. He's a player's coach, and he gets the most out of his players, particularly at the positions where he's most proficient with, and that being the running back position. Bengals running game was very good last year. I know Jeremy Hill fumbled, and I don't want to say single-handedly cost them the playoffs, but Gio Bernard, also an exceptional talent, but he was able to get the most out of both of these guys and turn the Bengals offense, which would typically be a passing offense, given the weapons they have, and make it more of a balanced one, and also make it a consistent one. So I think for teams looking for offensive coaches, which as it turned out was every team, he was going to be the best case scenario in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, as he's already been hired, he's made it very noted that he wants to move on from Johnny Manziel, which I think is a very good move for this team. It just wasn't a matchup that worked out for them. Manziel doesn't want to play there. That's obvious, and they're not going to maximize his potential. So they're probably looking at the draft. I've seen Goff come up as pretty much a shoe-in at this point, but you never know after the combine.
No such thing as a shoe-in right now with this quarterback class. It could be anybody.
Yeah, that's just a name I've seen come up a lot. So he's got a track record with developing quarterbacks, I think, as well. Andy Dalton got better year after year, and this was his best year before that injury. I remember there was a time span that he was in the running for MVP. I don't think that was ever a very serious thing, but he was putting up much better numbers than what we've seen in the past. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if he never suffered that injury.
He did have a good year. Obviously, his track record in the playoffs kind of speaks for itself. But then again, I don't blame that loss on A.J. McCarron one iota. So, yeah, it would have been interesting. He did have the best year of his career. So I do think that I think you're right that Jackson would be underrated as far as getting the most out of his quarterbacks. But I do also think that goes back to establishing the run and getting the most out of those guys. They had a great running game.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. The Browns have a couple guys with Isaiah Crowell and Duke Johnson. It's going to be interesting to see where they go. If I was him, I'd be going with Duke Johnson. He just seems like a bigger impact player. He can do more things on the field. And
well, I think that Duke is going to assume the Gio Bernard role. I think they have pretty much matching skill sets, and I think Duke was highly underused in his rookie year. But with the limited tread in his tires, I think that we poised for a big sophomore year because of that.
Yeah, so look out for him next year, anybody listening. And quick, before I move on to the next thing, he has just a quick stat I had on him. His coaching record with the Raiders was 8-8. So
right, that's what I thought.
He took a team that was not good, and he made them, you're in the running when you're 8-8. Another win or two, and you're in the playoffs. So it's definitely a respectable thing.
He really shouldn't have been fired. That was just an Al Davis quirk towards the end of his run there. It's going to be interesting with the Browns because, the Browns are synonymous with failure. But I do like the hire, and I like what they do with the front office. So with that being said, I'd give this an A-.
Yeah, and maybe it's a good thing for the Browns. They haven't been good since the early '90s. But moving on from that, my second favorite hiring, and this is probably where we're going to start being at a disagreement. I think a lot of people like Hugh Jackson the most, but my second favorite is actually Adam Gase. I have him. I think he was a very hot commodity this year. He has experience working with Peyton Manning, which, I mean, he didn't really have to help Peyton Manning much, but I think maybe he learned more from Peyton than what Peyton learned from him. But this year he actually helped Jay Cutler a lot cut down those interceptions. He went from, I believe, 18 last year to only 11, and Cutler's playing good football this year. Without some injuries, they could have been a team to contend as well.
Yeah, I like Jay Cutler a lot. I actually went out and grabbed him in my dynasty league for like a minimal price, and the return I got on that surprised me a little bit. I think that when you're looking at these offensive coordinator type coaches, Adam Gase was the hot name, and that was combined with him being a part of Peyton Manning's record-breaking season, the development of Cutler. But the thing is, John, I don't really understand the whole premise behind these teams targeting these quarterback gurus as head coaches, because that's not the job of the head coach is not to turn the quarterback around. The job of the head coach is to manage the team and make crunch time decisions and put everybody in the roster in a position to succeed. So in targeting these guys, to bring them in to try and like fix their quarterback or fix their offense, well, that's kind of the offensive coordinator's job. So you're hiring a guy good at one thing to do something that may be totally out of his comfort zone, which is why this hiring scares me a little bit in that regard. I don't know if Gase can if that's going to be an area of his expertise. Although I will say that wherever he's been as an offensive coordinator, he's always gotten the most out of the guys that he's had. Like look at when Matt Forte went down. Jeremy Langford and Kadeem Carey stepped up in a big way, and even Zach Miller behind Martellus Bennett turned into a bit of a weapon there at the end of the year. So I look at Gase and I look at a guy where he's young and maybe a little bit inexperienced, and maybe this may be a little too soon for him, but he can get the most out of what he has, and that is what a head coach. That's what you want out of a head coach. Really.
Yeah, that's an interesting point to make. Is he's never been in a head coaching position. He's a very young guy. I believe 37. He might be the youngest.
38.
38. Yeah. So he's very young. No experience there, but I guess at some point it needs to be a first time for everything. It's a team. Dolphins are trying to build around Tannehill. Like I said, he was good with Cutler, so maybe that's what their idea is. Like you said, when Forte went down, everybody behind him was playing well, and Gase also had C.J. Anderson. In the 2014 season, second half, he was probably one of the best, if not the best, runners in the game in the second half of that season. So they got Ryan Tannehill and Lamar Miller. Maybe they want to build a team around him. But like you said, it's more than just being an offensive coordinator. If you want a new offensive coordinator, that's what you do. He's a head coach. It's going to be interesting to see what he does with the new responsibilities. And, you got to wish him the best of luck. But any hiring like that should scare a team, when you haven't seen a guy.
In this case, though, if you remember, going back a couple of years, the Dolphins brought in Joe Philbin to do the exact same thing they want Adam Gase to do, and that's help develop Ryan Tannehill into becoming what they think could be an elite quarterback. And I thought that there was a time I thought that too, but this season was just such a step back for him. But again, that being said, I do think that Gase is the type of guy where he can come in and get the most out of his players, and for that reason, I think that when free agency beckons in a few weeks here, we're going to see Lamar Miller walk. Because I think they're gonna like what they have in Jay Ajayi in that backfield, and I think this could be a prime opportunity for him to become a superstar in this league.
Yeah, and he showed some good flashes in his limited time there, and that was a pick I really liked. I thought going into the season Lamar Miller was going to take a step back to Ajayi, just because he seems like a better all-around back. Lamar Miller. While he's a good back, is more of a banger bust guy in my mind, and Ajayi is more. He's a 3-down back, which you don't find often. So that's an interesting point as well. It'll be good to see where that goes. I'm gonna move on to a guy who does have head coaching experience, and Chip Kelly is my third on this list. He didn't work out in Philadelphia, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he just had too much power. All these moves he made to try to improve his team is what ultimately led to his demise there. It just didn't work.
No, and I think that was for a couple of reasons. I'm very familiar with that whole thing, just being here in the Philly market and working in the newsroom and and understanding the relationship Chip had with everybody behind the scenes. And from what I know, he really alienated some people with his personality. He is not a player's coach, to put it that way, like a Pete Carroll or like a Hugh Jackson type. Chip Kelly won't be confused for that. He is, however, a strategist that, with the right pieces, can get a lot out of his guys, and he's always got a plan. But I think what's really been crucial for him now in San Francisco, even though it might not have been the best situation that he could have landed in, is that he's learned from the mistakes that he made with the Eagles, and that he'll be a little more open, and hopefully be a guy that players can respect. Because that's half the battle. That's really half the battle of coaching. If your players can buy into what you're doing, the sky's the limit. Really, it just takes the talent on top of that. And Trent Baalke's the GM there, so Chip's not gonna have any power as far as player personnel is concerned, like he commanded in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you brought up about the whole emotional, mental aspect of it. Is it's a thing that gets overlooked. A lot of times when you see a team that's used to success and all of a sudden they're not doing so good, the locker room starts to turn. Kind of not that Jim Harbaugh was doing bad in his last year, but the locker room turned against him. There's a lot of reports that the players just didn't like him, and even though he had a successful career there and almost won them a Super Bowl, got him to it, he was out of it. So a lot of it is gaining the respect of your teammates. And I think he already has a lot of respect, and he's making Colin Kaepernick a very happy man, because I think Kaepernick was on his way out of there before this hiring.
Well, he still could be. What do you think happens there?
It's going to be interesting. Kaepernick's a guy that really fits. I mean, he can run the option, which is something that Chip Kelly really looks to do. I can definitely see them keeping him there. Admittedly, I haven't done a ton of research on the draft at this point. I like to wait until after the season, so I don't know the kind of guys that are coming up, but as of now, I can see Kaepernick being a good fit there, and if he can get him into a scheme that uses the best of his abilities, maybe get Kaepernick's confidence back up, because I think that was a lot of it too. Once you start having a bad season in the beginning of the year and you start doubting yourself, especially for a guy like him that kind of got thrown into it and had so much success right away, not used to having that type of failure. I think Chip Kelly's going to look to try to get him back to reaching his full potential there.
If they keep him, and Kaepernick's willing to learn, and he's open to new ideas, and he's open to changing his throwing motion and his mechanics, that could potentially work out. And if I were the Niners at this point, I would keep Kaepernick on a one-year deal. Well, I think he's still got time on his contract left, actually. In fact, he might even have a few years. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I would hang on to him now, because you're not going to get a lot of value for him if you trade him.
Yeah.
So that combined with the fact that this year's quarterback class is a lot of pocket passers. We don't really know what Chip Kelly wants out of a quarterback. We think it's the read option type of guy, but he made no effort to get that guy when he was in Philadelphia, when he had the total control like he wanted. So I don't know if that's what he wants or not, but if it is, it's going to be interesting with Kaepernick to see what kind of stuff they're able to do. There's not going to be a lot of talent around him, but it is a good opportunity for Kaepernick to bounce back, I think.
Yeah, I think so as well. And you're right. Maybe that's not what he's looking for, is this option passer. He could have made some moves, but he went out and got a guy in Sam Bradford that's pretty much the opposite. That's a guy I don't want running the option with all of his injuries, and he's just not an overly mobile guy. So maybe the public conception of that is a little bit off. But it'll be interesting to see what he does. He needed to change the scenery just as much as they did. It's interesting, in the beginning of the year, there were a lot of talks of him potentially winning Coach of the Year just from all those moves. It was so different, but then it just didn't work out, and now he's gone, and that's just the kind of business he's in.
Yeah, it is. And it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't help when you alienate people and you're ignoring people walking down the hallway, and it's just not good stuff. Now, I will say that there are a lot of mobile quarterbacks in the following year's draft. So that's, again, another reason to hang on to Kaepernick. See what you got here in this new system. And if you got nothing, draft the guy the next year.
Yeah.
But I don't see them competing anytime soon. I think they could be 3 or 4 years off just because of everything they've lost. And a lot of that's going to come down to Baalke, who's probably on a very short leash at this point, retooling that roster and getting guys in that are going to fit what Chip wants to do, whatever that is. We still don't know what that is.
Yeah.
But I would give this hiring probably – this hiring and the Gates hiring probably both B-minuses. I don't think Chip landed in the optimal spot. I thought that was Tennessee, not just because of Mariota,
Yeah.
but because of the weapons they had around him and the fact that Chip could just take his system, plug the guys in, and it could have been overwhelmingly successful right from the get-go. Here, it's going to take some time.
Yeah.
I don't think he has any of the right personnel for what he wants to do, and that's just going to take time. But for now, they'll be able to see at least what they have in the players they do have there and how they're going to fit into what Chip wants to do.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring up the Tennessee situation later because that one was a head scratcher to me, and that's where I thought he was going to go. But I'll have more on that later.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna move on from this. Right before that, though, I think the one of the other problems he could run into, Chip Kelly, his style, just running this hurry up offense and trying to get as many plays as he can, it leaves his defense on the field longer than any other defense. And at that point, you're leaving your guys out there to get tired, especially throughout a long season. Defensive linemen and linebackers, especially, these guys are gonna get tired and they can make mistakes. And we've seen that happen. It's just something. It's the style of it, but it's interesting to see. Prolonged. He had a good coaching record. It's just like I said, those moves ultimately cost him his job, and I'm just interested to see how it goes in the future.
Like I said, what this tenure is gonna come down to what Chip Kelly learned in Philly and how he learned from his mistakes. One of those was going hurry up on every play. You can't do that. You're gonna tire your defense out, and it's just not feasible in the NFL because you can't go out there and expect to score 50 points a game.
Yeah.
So he needs to, if he can pick his spots with it, it could be very effective.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see if he's willing to do that or if he's too stubborn and too set in his ways to change.
Yeah, and I think the way that he gets the optimal amount of effectiveness out of his style is to take the things that he did so well in Oregon and translate that into what you can actually do in the NFL. Because you're right, you're not going to put up 50 games in an NFL, 50
Right.
points in an NFL game, and he just.
But it can't be the exact same thing. It has to be like a condensed version of it, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So
And,
hopefully he's found that.
And with that, these next two are pretty similar to me. It was tough to order them. I just did it. So the next one I'm going to talk about is Ben McAdoo. And the weirdest thing about that hiring to me is just the fact that it's not Tom Coughlin. He's been there just absolutely forever. I don't know if he was the longest tenured coach, but he had to be up there. I would believe
he wasn't. Or maybe he was. No, I think Marvin Lewis might be the longest.
I knew it was between them. So
maybe. I don't know. I have to look that one up. But he was up there. I could say that for sure.
And I know that's a team that like to have the continuity there to promote a guy from within. And McAdoo has been successful working with Eli Manning. I saw a stat that Eli threw 27 interceptions in 2013, and he's thrown 28 since. He's got new talent around him and things like that. But you get to give at least some of that to McAdoo. Even with the main thing with him is just like Adam Gase. He's never been a head coach, and how he'll respond to the extra duties of that should be interesting.
Yeah, but unlike Adam Gase, I thought this was I don't want to say completely unlike because I thought that was a good hire, but I thought this was an excellent hire because the Giants were able to replace Coughlin, who created I don't want to say a tradition of winning because they're very inconsistent from year to year, but they did win 2 Super Bowls in the last 10 years or so. So with that said, to promote from within was probably the right move. You're going to keep continuity intact this way. And the players could continue to do what they've been doing, and you might have a younger, more fresh perspective on how to put the team together and what the players actually want. Maybe a coach that's more in tune with it. That could be what McAdoo is.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. It's like I said, it's a guy. They've already been working with him, so it's a familiar face. There's something good about having the continuity. When you see teams that change out even just their offensive coordinators often, it's like it just seems like there's no chemistry there. So being able to keep a guy that was already in the system and promote him, and nobody's looking at this hiring and saying that he's not qualified to do it. It's not like a weak move. So it's good to be able to have the ability to do something like that. I believe.
If it would have been any other organization, people probably would have spoken out. Although for some of these teams, he would have been a better hire than what they actually got. That said, I think for the Giants, this is a solid B hiring with the potential to become an A one day, depending on what happens. Again, Eli Manning doesn't have to switch systems. He's comfortable in the spot that he's in right now. He's got some weapons around him. But we'll see if they can expand upon that. And the real key, though, is going to be the defense and how they're able to rebuild that. Coughlin obviously had his ideas of how good defense needed to be run. Maybe McAdoo has some fresh ideas that can help, freshen things up for them and just spark some sort of change.
Yeah, and that's what they need. Coughlin had a great career there, multiple Super Bowls. You definitely can't, overstate what he did for them. But the past 4 years haven't been good for them, and they just needed a new face. And
they're not that far off, really. They were favored. I mean, after the first half of the regular season was done, everybody was picking the Giants to win that division, and it's easy to see why. That offense, when it's in full function, can be very dynamic. But I think they need to settle on a running back to carry the load, and I think that they just need to completely retool that defense. They just need something else.
Yeah.
They lost so much talent over the years to retirement and free agency, and they were never really able to fill those gaps. Now, they do have Landon Collins. He's a great player. Pierre-Paul, obviously, a great player, despite his hand. So that'll be another interesting development. But I think McAdoo is a good choice.
Yeah, I think so, too. And I think you're right. They're just a couple pieces away to making the playoffs. And, once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen, especially for them. You've seen them sneak into the playoffs, and then all of a sudden they're beating the Patriots multiple times.
They proved it time and time again. So
yeah. So with that said, I'm going to move on. After that, I got Dirk. I believe his last name would be pronounced Coder. I've never heard it, but
Dirk Cutter.
Cutter. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, Dirk Cutter. My biggest knock against him is that he shouldn't be their head coach because Lovie Smith shouldn't have been fired, in my opinion. But and I'm still I'm upset about that, even though I'm not a fan of the team.
Well, let's talk about that. Do you know why they fired Lovie Smith?
I have heard a rumor that they had fired Smith because they didn't want to lose Cutter.
That's right.
So they're obviously very high on this guy. So if he can meet up to those expectations, because this is a team that went from what two wins to 6. With a rookie quarterback at helm, so they're not that far off, and they've got pieces in place. So he's not taking over for a bad situation, and I do like keeping him there because he was instrumental. And I mean, Jameis Winston got better every single game. I'd watch highlights and I'd look at his stats and things like that. I like to keep tabs on everybody, and he was just getting better. He was improving. How much of that was just him mentally adjusting to the NFL? I'm not sure, and it's going to be interesting to see how much of that goes to it.
Yeah, he's obviously an exceptional talent. It's hard to say how much of an impact Dirk Cutter had on that whole situation. I'm sure he didn't hurt. He's a fine offensive coordinator. But I don't think the Bucs had anything to worry about as far as losing him. Then again, I could be wrong because I don't really know what these teams think about or who they like or who they don't like. But that being said, there was so many offensive candidates out there that it would be a little strange for a team to just reach out for Dirk Cutter like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that in addition to the quarterback play, the defense showed flashes of being very, very good. And they have some talented guys on that back end. They've got Gerald McCoy in the middle, obviously. Danny Lansana, linebacker, and Quan Alexander, linebacker. Good young talent that they can build upon. So to fire Smith like that, and this isn't like the McAdoo situation where you're bringing up a guy and we're keeping with continuity. This isn't really continuity in this case because Lovie Smith was fired. He didn't step down. He didn't retire or anything like that. So Cutter's going to be the head coach now, which means they're going to have to hire a new offensive coordinator who might want to do things slightly different than Cutter did in the first place, even if it is one of his own guys.
Yeah, and if I'm them, I want to keep the combination.
And
Go ahead.
a new defense, a new defensive coordinator to install a new defense.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm saying, if I were them, I would have kept Lovie Smith. He's got a track record. He's a good coach. He doesn't have a great record there. He inherited a bad team. You can't expect any coach to come in there and take a bad team and just make them great in a season like that. They're not far from being good. They lost 5 of their last 6 games. There was a time where it looked like they were competing for a wild card spot down the stretch. The team's going a long way, and like you said, there's young talent on both sides of the ball. Carter was great as an offensive coordinator. Jameis Winston, like I said, over 4,000 yards. He might win Rookie of the Year. He got better every game. On top of that, Doug Martin had one of his best, if not his best season.
It was his best season,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, a Pro Bowler. He saved my fantasy team like crazy. I can't.
Look
I
at the
think.
market. It's a top 5 running back
Yeah. I mean,
overall.
if I'm them, I want to keep that combination going. And like I said, like you said, I don't know if anybody was reaching for Cutter. There's a ton of guys pretty similar to him already on the market.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just not a good way to run your organization, to do something like that, to fire a coach because you don't want to lose the coach underneath him. Like, that's just not good business.
Yeah.
No other way to slice it.
And if I'm Lovie Smith, that's a slap in the face. I don't like that at all.
Yeah. But that said, they fired him, and what's done is done. You can't put the glue back into the glue gun. But I do think they could have done a lot worse with the guy they hired. So I gave this one a solid C.
Solid C? Yeah, that's about right. All right, so moving on to things that are bad, because these next two I'm not a fan of. Doug Peterson hiring, that's not a good pick. That's not a good pick for Philadelphia to me. Especially, it wasn't a good pick. It's even worse now when you know that it was pretty much his fault for mismanaging the clock. And just his explanation. We were talking about this last night about just wanting to keep Brady from getting the ball. Well, at the time there was like 7 minutes left. You got to take the shot, try to stop him, and then maybe think about not letting them have the ball again. You're down by 2 possessions. You can't blow all your time on 1 possession.
No, that was bad. And these Eagles reporters, man, they're ruthless over here. So he came in for the press conference, and they were already grilling him on the way that game played out and what his exact role was with the Chiefs. And here's what we know now. Apparently, since the Steelers game, which was about at the halfway point of the season, Andy Reid let Doug Peterson call the plays in the second half of games the rest of the way. Now, you want to talk about the Bucs firing Lovie Smith and how that's bad business and it's not the mark of a good organization? I love Andy Reid and all, but what was that? I've never heard of such a thing before. Why would that ever be? That's maybe something that like a high school team would do for like an intern on the team. Oh, you know what? As part of your internship, I'll let you call the plays in the second half.
Yeah.
But it's not even. It wasn't even like situational. Regardless, black and white. We're down by 20 points. Doug, you're taking over. We're up by 20 points. Doug, you're taking over. We're tied. It's crunch time. I'm not gonna call the plays. Doug, you call the plays. Like that doesn't work. I've never heard of that. To me, it's just totally inconceivable, actually.
Yeah, like you said, it doesn't even sound like it's a real story.
And to be honest with you, it's typical of the Eagles to bring in a guy like that. I don't want to say they're an incompetent organization. Actually, no, I'll say it. They are incompetent. Everybody lampooned the Redskins for years for that, and they answered their critics by building some organizational structure. They hired a coach. They hired a general manager. They moved their old general manager to a VP of vice president. And but they have a guy now that picks all the players for them. There's structure to that. Jeffrey Lurie, man, he doesn't care about. He likes to put on a facade over here that he cares about winning and he cares about the people, the city, and stuff. He doesn't. All he cares about is making money. And one of the reasons they fired Chip Kelly was to get a leg up on the coaching search. Well, guess what? Every coach they hired, every coach they interviewed, they let walk out of the room, Doug Peterson included. And I guess he was supposed to be their fallback option. Rather than make Gase a big money offer, they let him go. McAdoo would have been a very good hire for them. To one, stick it to the Giants, and two, be a guy that can actually come in with a proven actual offensive coordinator track record and fix what they've got. But they let him walk out of the room. Tom Coughlin at least has won before. He's done this. He's done this rodeo. He's been around the block. They let him walk out of the room. So he says it's a bad fit. So what do they have left? Oh, we'll hire Doug Peterson, who played quarterback here for like a year and is Andy Reid's understudy. And now what you have is a team that fired their highly successful head coach, and years later hired his protege.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up, just the irony behind that. And like you said, the fact that they fired him before the end of the season to get the leg up, and then they wind up with It's like it's selling. It's a settling decision. All these guys that we listed above them would have been better. I mean, it's just it's baffling the decision. There's no way that this was their guy. Like they did all the interviews and they said, all right, this is the guy that we want here.
It's inconceivable to me. And when you look at the Chiefs this year, the thing that we marvel at and what was so great about them was their defense and how they were able to manifest talent into on-field production, not just on special teams, but just on straight-up defense, shutting teams down, making plays, and creating turnovers and scoring points. That was the real selling point of the Chiefs to me this year, not Doug Peterson and the work he did with the quote-unquote work he did with Alex Smith. Come on, man.
He gave Alex Smith, who was already Alex Smith played a very similar game this year.
Alex Smith had an Alex Smith season.
Yeah. The only difference was the hiring of Jeremy Maclin really opened it up where they wound up scoring more. I know last year they had no touchdowns to wide receivers, but when you add a guy like Maclin in there, of course that's what's going to happen. It's not like he completely changed the entire mentality of the building or anything like that. He just took what was already there and they added a piece to it, and that's what happens.
Yeah, I would probably give this particular hiring I'd give it a D, but who knows? Who knows? Doug Peterson could be a good coach, but he might not be. And that's the counter argument that all the optimistic Eagles fans have. And there's not many of them, but there's a few. They'll argue that, Mike Tomlin wasn't a coordinator when he got hired, and look how he turned out. Or John Harbaugh was special teams coach. But the thing is, you can't hire – that's not a good way to do business either. You can't hire someone because they have no experience just because they have no experience thinking that it could work out. No, it takes a special kind of person to make that work. And notice there's only a couple coaches like that have come into the league and have had success that way. So this hiring to me screams Jim Zorn in that it could be like a one and done or a two and done. Probably more likely a two and done, but I could see a one and done. And on top of that, even if it did work out, the Eagles just didn't do their due diligence with this search. They did a horrible job. So for that reason, I gave it a D.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the negativity of this comes from. Because like you said, he could wind up being a great head coach for all we know. But the fact of the matter is, the way that they handled the situation, this shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have been their hiring. And that's where a lot of the negative that's where it comes from.
And you want to talk about good organizations doing good business. They said that Howie Roseman, the current quote-unquote GM, said that they're going to hire a player personnel guy. But when they go interviewing people, they're going to interview them in a way that they're going to tell them all different things, and their role would be different depending on who they decide to hire. So if they were to go out and hire a Bill Polian type, he would have total control over the roster, essentially. But if they were to go out and hire Joe Schmo, well, Joe Schmo would still have to answer to Howie Roseman. But it's like you're either looking to find a certain type of guy in that search, or you're not. So to interview both guys, like both types of guys anyway, and hire them depending on who they are, it's also just not good business.
Yeah. And,
it's really weird. And go ahead.
You go ahead, because I was going to move on, but you go ahead and finish it off.
It's just weird. I don't like Jeffrey Lurie at all. I think that he's a phony and a fraud and just a terrible owner. Like at least I can say for people who crap on Dan Snyder all the time for all the stuff with the nickname and everything that goes on with that. But one thing I can say about him is at least he wants to win, and he's willing to do what it takes to make that happen.
Well, he took a team that was pretty much projected to be the worst team in the league almost unanimously and got them to the playoffs in one way or another. I mean, that was a team at the beginning of the season was supposed to be the laughingstock of the league pretty much, and then, they went up in a playoff game.
It turned over instantly because they hired their personnel guy, one of the best guys in the league, and it got to the point where, they were getting banged up, but they were bringing guys up off the street to fill roles in the defense, and they were doing an admirable job. So that notwithstanding, the Eagles aren't like that at all, and they're not going to do what it takes to win. They're going to try and make as much money as possible. Unfortunately, they're going to find that it's really hard to make money when you're not putting butts in seats, and it's really hard to put butts in seats when you're not winning games.
Yep, that's what it comes down to.
And they're going to find that out very, very soon. I think they got lucky with Andy Reid and McNabb. That was a wonderful combination that just happened to work out, right place, right time. And now they're going to go back to the mediocrity and losing that we've been accustomed to in more later years.
Yeah, and off topic slightly here. I always wonder what would have happened if McNabb and Andy Reid actually won that Super Bowl, if he'd still be there to this day. It'd be a whole different NFL, I think. It's a big chain reaction. But
Yeah, especially considering who they played.
yeah, I mean that would have been big. But anyway, that's probably for a different time, I guess. I'm gonna move on.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get to the last one and try to finish this off here. This is just a bad hiring to me. Mike Mularkey. First of all, he has a track record of being a bad head coach. 18 and 39 career record with that. That's not something you're looking for. And on top of that, the Titans job should have been one of the most favorable jobs for any head coach coming into the league. They have a whole bunch of young talent. They have Marcus Mariota, who really looked the part, injuries notwithstanding, and they have the number one pick in this year's draft. If I'm a head coach, that's where I want to be. But they couldn't manage to bring anybody in, and that's just baffles my mind.
It's weird because, and I should preface this by saying, in regards to my comments about the Eagles, I wasn't saying that because I hate the Eagles or anything like that. I was just calling them out on their bullshit, and I'll do that with any team, including teams that I like. So here goes the Titans. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Young talent, not just Mariota, but also David Cobb showed flashes at running back at the end of the year, and Dorial Green Beckham.
Yeah.
Is going to be a talent one day. He has issues, but nevertheless, and Delaney Walker, a great tight end, and some pieces on defense like Arakpo. But I didn't really hear of them interviewing anybody, come to think of it.
Yeah, there was no story. There was no story that I heard that they were bringing anybody in. And I thought, going into the offseason, that that's where like I said, where Chip Kelly was going to land. And I didn't even hear a story that they interviewed him.
To me, that almost made like too much sense. So I'm not surprised that they didn't hire him. But I didn't really hear of anything. I didn't really hear of them interviewing anybody for the job. And what happens is Dolphins hire their coach, Browns hire their coach, Niners hire their coach, Bucks hire their coach, and so on and so forth. Eagles hire Peterson. And we get to the end of it, and the Titans are the last team standing. And what they have now is the luxury. And I know people will argue you don't really want to wait that long because you want to get your staff together and you want to tie up all the loose ends going into the offseason, whatever. But they have the luxury of waiting for these teams that are playing this weekend to lose so they can interview their coordinators who did an exceptional job both on offense and defense. That's the one thing we'd say for these last four teams. They're well-rounded on both sides of the ball, and they got good people in those positions that would make great head coaches. Instead, they didn't interview anybody. They didn't wait to interview anybody. They just promoted Mike Mularkey, who, like you said, has just a shit record. I can swear, right?
Yeah.
He's a shit record as a head coach. He doesn't really, and on top of that, he doesn't really have any notable accomplishments or anything like that. At least for a guy like Adam Gase, we could say that, yeah, he's never been a head coach, but he turned around Jay Cutler, and he did this, he did that. Hugh Jackson, he had a good year with the Raiders, and Doug Peterson, he's, Andy Reid's disciple, whatever. But then you got a guy like Mularkey, and what is he? What is he good for?
Yeah, and like I was saying, this is a team. This future for this team should have been bright. I know they weren't going to be like this next year being in a playoff hunt or anything, but the future should have been bright. They have all these young guys that they're developing. You should be excited to watch this team. And this hiring, to me, if I'm a fan of that team, that's dimming my expectations a lot, and that's sad.
Titans needed to make a move because as bad as that division was this year, in future years, I don't believe that will be the case. I think the Jaguars have too much young talent. Bad, even though I'm not a Blake Bortles fan, I still think they got too much talent around him to be a terrible team. And then the Colts, they're keeping Pagano. They're going to try and make it work. So they have too much talent to really be bad too. So that just leaves you with the Titans, who have talent as well, and needed to make a good head coaching hire, and they didn't do that, not even a little.
Yeah, and they're going to fall behind. Like you said, there's teams there that are on the come up. The Texans are on the come up. They're a quarterback away from I mean, they were in the playoffs this year, and they're a quarterback away from being good. They have a lot of talent there. The Jaguars have all this. They have all this cap space this year, and no free agents that they need to keep. Uh, they look good in flashes. They're a team that I can definitely see being good. And the Colts can make a comeback. All they need is Andrew Luck to go back to playing how he was before. Put a couple more pieces there with them. These are all teams that can possibly compete. And then you have the Titans that make this move, and it's like they're stepping back.
Oh, no question. I just question what do they see in this guy? What is Mike Mularkey going to bring to the table? I don't know. They didn't really win at the end of the year, so I guess the only argument you could maybe make is like continuity, but a continuity of what? A continuity of losing?
Yeah,
like,
that's not something you want. Yeah.
Jesus Christ! It was like they did what the Eagles did, except worse.
Yeah, this was the biggest head scratcher of the entire, as far as coaching goes, for the whole offseason for me. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe they're seeing something in this guy, but it's not like this is a new guy on the come up. He's been around. He hasn't been successful in this capacity, and I don't believe that he's going to be now. He's inheriting a team that was last in the league in wins. Like I said, a lot of young talent, so maybe he can turn it around. But he doesn't have a history of doing that. He's inherited bad teams in the past, and they stayed bad.
They're gonna have the number 1 pick this year. I would expect them to have the number 1 pick as long as he's the coach. When you fire your head coach, you want to take the offseason, hire the best possible candidate that you can. All right. They hired the worst possible candidate, and they still have the worst coaching staff in the league. So, for that reason, I can't justify giving this anything better than an F.
Yep.
They failed here, and they're going to continue to fail until their ownership wakes the hell up and decides we don't want to be the Cleveland Browns. It's pretty much what it comes down to.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's just, you know, like I said, they have all the talent, but half of it's got to be the coaching. The coaching staff can't maximize. A lot of these guys are young too. They need a good coaching staff to be able to reach their potential, and that's not what they have. And they're going to be wasting their careers there as long as this coaching staff remains in place.
Right. They had a very good draft, but in hiring a bad coach, you're squandering potential, and it's going to be very sad to see. We look back on it, and Marcus Mariota's NFL career isn't that impressive because the Titans front office failed to put everything around him necessary to make him great.
Yep, I agree with that. So I guess we went through everything. If you want to throw anything else in there before we sign off, this would be the time to do it.
Yeah, looking ahead to next year, I think that the Titans' job could become open again if the Titans wake up and realize that Mike Mularkey's awful. I think the Eagles' job could become open again if they realize they made a huge mistake and they could just end up trying to clean house entirely. On top of that, I'm trying to think of like future openings that we can like prognosticate a little bit. The Rams would be one. Jeff Fisher probably should have been fired this year, but he's the head of the coaches committee, so he's got a little extra leash.
Oh yeah.
Or at least that's what people speculate. And the expectations will be high for the first year in LA, so that's one to look out for. Bengals and Marvin Lewis. There's just going to come a tipping point there. Just the way they lost that game, they could have fired him on the spot, and I don't think anybody would have had a problem with it.
Yeah, I was surprised that he was not. That was his players losing their temp. Pretty much, they cost themselves the game with those penalties. I mean, maybe Roethlisberger makes one more big throw or something, and they get the field goal. But I mean, they just handed it to him at the end.
Yeah, and I think that when he does get it, I think he will eventually get fired. I think when that day does come, he'll be immediately hired on another team because he does have a good record overall.
Yeah.
And you could do a lot worse with a head coach, but in this particular situation, there might be a shelf life for that. I think Pagano's got to be on the hot seat again, just because they didn't really they're keeping the GM and they're keeping the coach in Indy, so they're not really accomplishing anything. If things don't get better, something's going to change. So that's one to look out for. Jason Garrett is Jerry Jones' yes man, but with a healthy Tony Romo, if they can't get the job done, that's another one to look out for. Other than that, I'd probably throw San Diego into the mix with Mike McCoy, who could have been fired this year, and certainly Jim Caldwell and the Lions.
Yeah.
The only reason he didn't get fired was because they won a couple games at the end of the year.
Yeah, he
But
benefited.
they really shouldn't have, because
he benefited from Matt Schaub figuring himself out. Matt Schaub not Matt Schaub, Stafford. Yeah. Just played a lot better throughout the stretch of the season, and that probably saved his job.
Yeah. So he's definitely one that I think could get fired, because I don't see him having a good year next year, not in that division. So we're going to be looking at probably another 7 openings coming up.
Yeah.
And hopefully this time teams won't be so focused on hiring offensive coaches, but rather just hiring the best man to lead their team.
All right. And do you have those ratings you gave for each, the letter ratings? Do you have them written down, or do you have them remembered? I'd like for you to just go down them one more time.
Yeah, I think I know them off the top of my head. Yeah, so I give Hugh Jackson, the Browns, an A-, which is surprising, given that it's the Browns. But apparently they're tired of losing. So what they did prior to the hiring was they brought in Paul DePodesta to run all their football stuff. Now, if the name sounds familiar, it's because he's the character that Jonah Hill portrayed in the movie Moneyball. So while he's not a football guy, he is going to make smart organizational decisions that are going to benefit them in the long term. And obviously, great minds think alike. And Hugh Jackson was my top coaching candidate for this year. So it was a good move.
Yeah.
Though it is the Browns, it was a good move.
Yeah, and it's weird to see them be the best at something, but I really think that they nailed it this time. I think hiring him, it's just going to change the whole culture of everything that they're doing. They're doing something different, and it's going to be interesting to see how fast it pays off. I don't even think it's a question of if it pays off. I think it's how fast it pays off. I'm very confident in their decision here.
Me too. So that one gets an A-. Next is the Giants, and Ben McAdoo gets a B. 1 for the continuity, 2 because I think he's got some great upside as a coach, 3 because he's got a track record with Eli Manning and a built-in relationship, and 4, one thing I didn't mention previously is that I watched some of the press conferences for these new coaches, and his was the one that impressed me the most. He really seems committed to building a winning culture with the Giants, and I'm curious to see what different things he brings to the table that Coughlin either didn't bring to the table or couldn't bring to the table because of his age.
Yeah. So that'll be an interesting one to see what he can do to take the success that they already had, and they've been lacking more so recently, and to just take a team that has been there before and implement maybe some improvements to things that he's seen, or just completely change some things and just see what he can do with the team.
Oh, for sure. B- I gave to Chip Kelly and Adam Gase, mostly because for Gase it was because I don't think that he was the best hire, but he was the most hyped, and he might even be a little overrated in that regard, but I do think he's a good coach, and I do think that he's going to do some interesting things with that Dolphins offense, which has a lot of great young talent. Ryan Tannehill notwithstanding. Chip Kelly, also a B- with the Niners. With the Titans, he probably could have been an A, or at least an A-. But aside from, we talked about Colin Kaepernick, when you look at the rest of that offense, it doesn't match what Chip Kelly purportedly wants to do at all. Like you got a guy like Carlos Hyde there, and behind him you have Mike James, I believe it is, another power runner, and then from there guys like Kendall Gaskins and Sean Drawn, not guys that. Not to say they're not talented, but they're bruisers. They're downhill runners.
Mm-hmm.
Just like DeMarco Murray was a downhill runner. But Chip brought him in thinking that he was just good, so we could make him great. Or, well, that doesn't quite sound right because Murray was the top rusher the year before. So he thought that just by adding that in, I guess, that it was going to yield results.
Yeah, he just didn't fit the scheme.
He also just didn't understand that you don't give $8.5 million a year to a guy that you're going to sporadically use.
Yeah.
That just doesn't. But he's not the GM anymore here, and we're gonna find out if he learned from his mistakes. But overall, when you peel away all the bullshit, I do think he's a good coach. And while I've criticized Jed York to no end for his firing of Jim Harbaugh and his hiring of Jimbo Tomsula, this was a good one. I thought. I liked it.
Okay, so B- is there?
Yeah, B- for the Niners and a B- for the Dolphins. From there, I'm trying to think. Dirk Cutter to the Bucks got a C for me because this was partially due to the whole Lovie Smith situation and that whole fiasco, but also partly due to the Bucks thinking that they had continuity in promoting him, but in actuality, it's going to force the defensive players to learn a whole new system in all likelihood. Because Lovie Smith was the lone Tampa 2 guy left in the NFL, at least as far as head coaches go. So unless they hire a Lovie Smith type in that role, which will be hard to find, I mean, outside of Lovie Smith himself, that's going to bring some changes to the defense, and there could be another adjustment period. And as a young team, that's the last thing you want. That said, he did do some good things with the offense. Doug Martin and Jameis Winston. Winston had a good rookie year, and they can at least continue to build upon that. So that hiring got a C from me. It was average, and they could have hired many worse people.
Yeah.
After that, Eagles get a D because partially due to their lack of a coaching search and partially due to really not hiring a guy that's very qualified. I would say that of this, I think it was 6 guys that got hired, right?
I believe 7. I can count real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 7.
7?
Yeah.
And who am I missing?
You're probably forgetting Malarkey because he's forgettable.
No, I was going to get to him.
McAdoo. I think you already went over everybody. Jackson, Gase, Kelly, McAdoo, Cutter, Pedersen, and Malarkey.
Oh yeah, I did. I forgot McAdoo. Yeah, I think outside of Malarkey, the Eagles went with probably the least qualified guy for the job, and that's not a good way to go about these coaching searches. You want the best guy with the best track record that you can come in, and he can get the most out of your players, and he can get them gear them towards a Super Bowl run. I don't think anybody in the right mind sees Doug Peterson as the type of coach that is going to lead the Eagles Super Bowl charge. I don't see it. But that's not even the point. The point is they hired a guy that wasn't really that qualified. And while it's worked out before, guys like that can become good coaches, it's also failed totally miserably. Look at Jim Tomsula. Look at Jim Zorn. List kind of goes on and on. I'm trying to think of others, but nothing's really coming to mind. But overall, I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know if this was a way to try and appease Sam Bradford. That'll be another interesting thing to monitor, too, with them. Whether or not they give Sam Bradford $25 million like he's requesting. Though, Peterson does like Bradford, so we'll monitor that. But that gets a D because they just didn't do a very good job with that. And the Mike Mularkey in Tennessee hiring gets an F because it just wasn't good. That's what more can I say? It was no good. It reeked. The coaching search sucked. One thing that I do want to mention that gets lost in this, and it's something that good organizations like to do when they're having these searches. They like to bring in guys from all over the league to interview because it's a chance to pick their brain on their perspective of what it takes to have a good team. Number one. Number two, you can kind of take a look and see what everybody else is doing and is it working, and you can kind of tailor your strategy around that. But when you don't interview anybody and you promote the interim coach who has like a .3 winning percentage or something like that, like 30%, whatever that number was, that's just no good. And when you have young talent that's going to have to suffer through that, that just makes it even worse.
Yeah,
So.
and as you said, it's not continuity. You're not building upon anything if you already have been losing. You don't want to continue. That's not the type of thing that you want to continue. Obviously,
No,
it's just a bad hire. It's an F because it was a failure.
right. There's a difference between patience and continuity, or I should say there's a difference between being impatient and having continuity. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
If you hire a guy and you have a shitty team and he goes 4-12 his first year, that is not necessarily grounds to fire him, because they can get better if you give them the right pieces to have success, I guess. That would be, to fire a guy like that would be impatient, and that's the mark of a bad organization. Continuity would be keeping that guy and seeing it through, but you also want a timeline, and you don't want to overstay that. You don't want the guy to overstay his welcome or anything like that. But with Malarkey, this will be his second official head coaching job. He's had 2 interim jobs in between. He was hired by the Bills in the early 2000s, or the mid 2000s, to be their coach. Then I guess he was the interim coach of the Jaguars.
Yeah, I believe so.
And then the interim coach of the Titans, and got hired to the same position. So, I mean, we'll see, but I don't see that working out. Yep. I just don't.
And the interesting thing about all this is that we could be entirely wrong, because it's for all we know, we're completely opposite here. And it's just going to be interesting to see. I mean, I don't believe we are. I believe we know what we're talking about, but it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how next year plays out.
It always is. That's what I love the off season for that reason. It's fun to prognosticate this stuff.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of stuff going on in the off season. There's just not any games at the playoffs.
And now we'll be able to come back here and look back on this podcast and find out just how right we really were.
Yep, and I look forward to doing that, and I look forward to having you on here again sometime soon.
Yeah, man. Well, this was a lot of fun. We'll do it again soon.
Yep, I'll have you on here. Well, thanks for coming here, and yeah.
Thank you, John. Have a good one, brother.